Next Curve.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Next Curve's Rethink webcast series in collaboration with Debbie Reynolds Consulting. This series is called The State of Privacy and Trust, where we focus on all things privacy, trust, and security related. And there's always a lot to talk about, and there's always a lot to catch up on, right? And of course, I'm joined by Debbie Reynolds, who is the data diva. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for inviting me on the show. As always, you always have deep things to talk about. So this is always fun for me. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, no, I have a blast with you as well. And, for those of you out there who don't follow Debbie, you really should. She's doing everyone a favor. And especially as we are in the midst of a massive generative AI hype cycle, I think you're doing something very rare, which is trying to provide perspective to the public on what safe use of these technologies look like, right? I mean, because, quite honestly, there's been a lot of news around generative AI. I mean, I don't know, since we last talked, you had GPT-4 that was announced and released. You had Microsoft announce their Bing chat, and then in response, you saw Google just kind of scramble and put out Bard, which was their response to the Bing chat announcement and subsequent pilot release. I don't know what you call it. They call it alpha, but so a lot of stuff happening. And then now there's news everywhere about everyone now jumping on the generative AI bandwagon with very little. I don't know. There's very little out there talking about what is safe use or privacy, let's say conscious use of these tools, or even corporate confidential use of these tools. And I know you've already posted a number of things in that regard. So yeah, why don't we talk about that in this installment of our show here, Debbie?
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, first of all, people are kind of wrapped up into the hype. Obviously, these other companies, they're all jockeying for people's money and attention to be able to have something that can ride this generative AI wave. But, I feel like we're saying the same message and have been saying the same message for a long time, which is don't put sensitive information into these tools, don't put confidential information into the tools. It's just not good, right? Because the model learns from whatever you put in there, and it could possibly regurgitate what you've put in there to other people or other things, right? So when you are using these chatbots, you're consenting to their terms of service, to their privacy policy, and things like that. So the issue with consent is that there's almost no lit to what you could consent to, right? So I tell people you can't legally sell your limbs, but that's about it, right? So it creates the relationship between a user and a company that puts out a tool is already asymmetrical. And I think the AI creates like astronomical asymmetry in this situation, because you just have no clue what interesting or different things that they could possibly do with this data, right? Because people don't even know really how to use it. Like people like me, I like it because I'm a tinkerer, right? So I like to always play around with stuff and see what it can do, see what the limits are. So it's fun for me, but I'm smart enough to know not to put my personal information in there. But then the other flip side of that is that, this tool is vacuuming up information off the internet. So, there are obviously some IP copyright issues, but then there are privacy issues. And part of that is a lot of people don't properly secure their information. So they think that their data hides in plain sight. But now you have these tools that they're like a hungry bear, and what they want is data, right? So they're going out to suck this information in. So I tell people, if you have stuff that you thought was private, check your settings and make sure that they aren't, like let's say you sent a link to a friend and maybe you put the permissions on it that anybody can see it. That may be sucked up by the internet, right? By these tools. So I think people just really need to be thinking about that. And then I think, I would love your thoughts on just the tool and what it can do. I can tell you from my perspective, what I've been playing around with.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I've actually been exposed to this generative AI stuff for quite some time because I do a lot of work with the semiconductor industry players, and I would say for the last year and a half, they've been fronting a lot of these outputs from generative AI, large language model applications, and honestly, I have to say. And it has been my impression for a long time is this stuff is just it's useless. I always go back to what Sam Altman said 3 months ago, is that it can do a couple of things that may give you the impression that it's a misleading impression that this thing can do something great. The interesting thing is there are very few instances where it will produce something really cool. There are some narrow functions that I found where it could be really useful. Now, like one of the things, just so that I prove that I'm not just some grumpy old guy, I'm actually a technologist who critically looks at these technologies and what they're capable of versus just jumping in onto a bandwagon and, going with what a vendor or a company's press release might suggest, right? The thing is, something like in gaming, for non-player characters, for open world type things where maybe there's certain elements or personas that are AI driven. I think it would be really cool, right? You have all these different parameters that you can embed or assign to a particular NPC, as they're called, and create a dynamic world, truly, with characters that are AI driven that seem human-like. Now, that's a benign application, right? And in fact, it could be really, really cool. But the bottom line is what the AI is doing is just coming up with stuff. It's just making things up. And that is really what these generative AI tools are maybe useful for. But I think you have to be really cautious. That's the way I look at it. And I think what people do is they impart too much trust into the technology without qualifying and establishing trust with the people who build these applications and the other folks who are participating as users, trusting them as community members.
Yeah, that's all true. But almost, what these AI tools are doing is doing what search engines have done for decades, which is when you do a search, they'll say, here's 1 million hits. There aren't 1 million hits, right? Yeah. There are probably some that are more relevant than others. But this wants to give you an impression that regardless of what you ask it, it's going to give you an answer. And the answer may not be true. It may not be right? But it's very confident and it'll give you the answer. And for me, even though people are talking about the search use case, to me, that's like the least interesting use case of all for things like generative AI. Like I think of it, I use it as like a virtual assistant, right? So like proofreading stuff, maybe creating, like if I have notes, I'll have it create outlines of my notes or whatever. So I think of it as more of a low stakes assistant. I would never ask it for something, why would I ask it to tell me something that I can find on the internet myself? That doesn't make sense, right? So, and then do it wrong and then tell you like the wrong information. So, no.
Exactly. And that's that whole hallucination issue problem that everyone talks about, right? And then, here's the thing. But when you look at the examples that you just listed out, here's the funny thing: is there are already applications, a lot of applications that do that. And when you look at the additional value generative AI can bring to the table, it's just it ends up being incremental. And so this thesis or this hypothesis that there's going to be a revolution is actually, I think, my gut feel tells me that it's misguided. What we're going to find out is that these things actually are not as good as what we thought they or we were told or led to believe that they would be, and that they will actually exhibit they'll inject issues into a process, into a flow that we will then, as humans, have to manually, remedy and correct. And so that ends up being additional, work that we have to do. And so I think honestly, I think it's going to kind of balance itself out because, number one, the technology doesn't do what a lot of people think it can do.
Right. That's the big problem. That's the problem right there in a nutshell, which is you're sort of pretending or you're abdicating your human judgment to AI doesn't know anything. So it's like the blind leading the blind, right? Yeah. That's the problem. So knowing what it can do, what it can't do is very important, but it's kind of going to like mythical proportions in terms of what it can do. But I do have a little disagreement with you.
Which is
about kind of, I think this is revolutionary. Like this is going to be, I can see it already like completely wiping out whole industries. Think about when you call to get let's say you go on the internet and you're trying to get a service appointment and you're doing a little chatbot thing and it's so stupid and doesn't know anything, keeps asking you the same thing over and over. Yeah. Something like ChatGPT or generative AI could be very helpful in that conversation. Or like enterprise search. Like enterprise search to me is like gone, right? Because I've seen people try to do these systems and it's really hard to do. And so having something that could actually do that, enterprise search in a way that makes it easy for people, not make it so expensive. I think that those types of things. Many years ago when I used to have an assistant, almost everything that person used to help me do, I can do with AI. So I have AI to schedule my appointments. I have them like put my notes in format stuff. Something crazy. Like I'm doing, I think I told you this example. Like I had a bibliography in AP format and I wanted in Vancouver, right? Yeah. So that's something I don't have to do. That's something I don't have to hire someone to do. It does it like in 30 seconds. So for me, that's great. But like I would never ask it like, to write stuff for me or tell me something, it's not a source of truth because it's what it is a mashup of stuff that's true and stuff that's not true. And it wants to give you a result. So it will give you a result regardless of whether it's true or whether it's right. I've asked it, I would ask it, okay, tell me this. And then I say, okay, give me the source. And I would look at the source. I'm like, these are like totally made up. Like these do not exist. Like you're pointing to websites that don't exist. You're talking about people, you added people's names and stuff that they don't exist. Right. So I don't think that it's a good use for that. But I do think like, for example, if you want someone to sort of help you massage, let's say, okay, like for example, let's say a reporter called you, right? And they want a quote from you and would you write it out or whatever. You may write the quote out and then you may throw it in there. It's like, improve this quote and make it in a format that's suitable for the New York Times or something that the New York Times would write or something. That's what I think that you should be doing with this. Like I don't want to hear anyone talking about, oh, this is going to diagnose someone's healthcare or like, decide who's going to get what job or who gets financed. Like that's bananas. That's ridiculous. Right. So I see it as more of a low level helper.
That's what they're talking about. I mean, those are exactly the applications that people are talking about. But I think you make a really good point. Here's the thing: is that there's the public, there are these public generative AI engines and applications, and then there's private. There are private, because I was at the NVIDIA GTC conference this week, and that's one of the things that they were talking about, or last week. And but the thing is that obviously, if you do a private private generative AI application, it takes a lot of work, and you have to train on a lot of data, and you might not have enough data to actually reach let's say a cognitive tipping point for your application. So, the thing is that I think there's way too much simplistic thinking about this. Not a lot of people have looked under the hood to figure out, okay, how does this stuff really work? From business models and application standpoints, no one's really looked at, okay, when you talk about personalized responses from, let's say, a public ChatGPT, well, what does that mean? How much does that engine actually know about you, and what does that constitute in terms of an infringement of privacy, and how aware are users of the associated risks? Yeah. But I think these are all things that are still open, and I think one of the things that you're doing very well is helping people understand the questions to ask. And I think those are the big ones. Well, I kind of see myself as doing the same thing, because I could very easily just drink the Kool-Aid like everyone else and say it's going to be a revolution. But the research I do, my job is not to go and evangelize technologies without doing research and then actually opening up my mouth. And it's about telling people the way it is. What is the state of technology as the foundation of what Next Curve is? It's not about evangelizing press releases and what people are fancifully saying about their products and their technology. And I can tell you right now, people are way off on this.
Oh, absolutely. I think so. They're mythologizing it in a way that's not helpful, right? Because it's not true. They don't really know what it can do. Yeah. I think in some ways we've entered the it sucks to be you realm of human existence, because people don't, we still have people putting in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 passwords, and now we're like creating compute that's like so complex. I mean, how can we have people really understand what the hell it is that they're doing? Like, how do they understand consent in this era, right? How do they understand how to protect themselves? It's like extremely hard.
And you made a great point. Actually, to be able to use these tools properly, it takes a lot of experience and knowledge.
Right.
Which makes casual use actually quite a risky thing. Because part of casual use is, having a casual lens on trust. Right. Going back to one of our key themes, trust. And once people put misplaced trust in something that is not trustworthy, that's when we get into big problems. Yeah. So
you're right. I agree.
But so we are way over on our time here.
No.
To a 10-minute thing, but I think we're at 20. But hey, it was great jumping on with you to talk about this. I know it's something we want to do for a few days now.
Yeah.
Since the release of some of these interesting headlines. So to our audience, thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate your interest in our chats. And remember to follow Next Curve at www.next-curve.com and follow Debbie Reynolds, the data diva, at www.debbiereynoldsconsulting.com. You must follow her. And, if you do, you're going to be a lot smarter about these technologies and how to use them safely and responsibly. So remember, it's all about responsible AI. That is going to be the big thing in the next 6 months.
That's right.
So jump on that bandwagon.
That's right. Get on it.
All right. Get on it. We'll see you. Thank you.